All righty, well, let's get started. We'll have some stragglers coming in. Where are you going? You can't leave. All right, I won't wait for you. That's a promise. All right, we are in chapter 8 of our book, Spiritual Depression. I forgot the title. So just a little bit of review, and I quoted from the book there on your handout. We have considered the way in which the devil gets us to concentrate on the past, some sin we have committed, the time we have wasted, how we bemoan it all and are miserable in the present because we are worrying about the past. And we have seen how, if that does not work, he changes his tactics completely and tries to depress us in the present by filling us with fears and forebodings about the future. So, do you all remember talking about that the last couple of weeks, about being worried about some sin in the past and not understanding our forgiveness, and then if that's not why we're depressed, we're thinking too much about the future and what that's going to do to us, or what we're going to do, what's going to happen to us in the future, and we're scared and have fear about that, and we don't have a spirit of fear. So then he talks about miserable Christians, and obviously that's what we don't aspire to be, I hope, that we aspire not to be miserable Christians. But it's a quote from the book there I found particularly poignant. There's something that is innate in human nature. Nobody wants to be miserable, although I am aware of the fact that there are people who seem to enjoy being miserable, and some who seem to find their happiness in being unhappy. Know anybody like that? They're not happy unless they're complaining about something, and they don't really know how to be happy. And that sort of rolls into what we talked about, and we've talked about it a couple times, is temperament, or our personality, and how that's still part of us, even as before. We take that from before conversion to after conversion. We still have our personality. That's who we are, and we don't lose that. But that can also that can have an impact and have an effect on how this spiritual depression manifests itself. But we don't want to be driven by that. We don't let that rule us, and we're going to talk a lot about that with feelings today, because that's the title of our chapter. So let's jump into it. So I've got some general statements about feelings, about where do feelings come in, what's their place, and what should their position be in the Christian experience. So first of all, your feelings must be engaged. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, if you remember, from Romans 6:17, the verse there. But thanks be to God that you who were once slaves of sin have become obedient from the heart to the standard of teaching to which you were committed. So you remember the three things we talked about that make up who we are as a person? Caleb wasn't here, he gets a pass. Anybody remember the three things that make you who you are? I should have told you there'd be a test. Maybe you would have taken notes. One was the mind, remember that? The heart and the will. And that's evident in that passage from Romans, that you were once slaves of sin, become obedient from the heart. Obedient, that's the will, doing the things we need to do. From the heart, that's the feelings part of it. And then to the teaching, that's the mind. So what do we know? What have we learned? What do we know about God and about Jesus and ourselves, for that matter? So that's doctrine. But it's not. We tend to maybe we talk about the lopsided Christian, or the unbalanced Christian, who focuses too much on one or the other of those three things. Maybe I'm only interested in the intellectual stimulation I get from discussing theology, or maybe I'm only interested in what I do. I can act like a really good Christian. I can obey the law as much as as better than everyone else, at least better than everyone else I see. Maybe I think I'm doing better than them, but I'm not. But there's still the heart. The heart is still there. So your feelings are part of you, and they have to be engaged, and we can't just ignore them. So, having said that, what do we do with our feelings? And how do we deal with them? And he makes a statement in the book that you cannot create or command your feelings. Do you agree with that? And then B, why or why not? Can you create feelings? Create emotion?
You can put yourself in a place where you feel them more than another place. Like if I watch a really sad movie, that's going to create feelings.
Okay. But you've done so Becky said that you could watch a sad movie and that's going to make you sad, right? But can you just say, I'm going to be sad now? And not that you would ever do that. What can you say? I'm going to be happy now. And make yourself be happy.
We try sometimes.
Yeah, we do try sometimes, yeah.
It's funny because when you said, can you make yourself sad, I instantly thought, no, just like, you can't genuinely make yourself, you can think about things, like either you watch a movie or you just dwell on something that happens. But then once you said, can you make yourself happy, like, I instantly thought yes. So that's, I don't know why, I don't know.
You think you can make yourself happy, but you can't make yourself sad?
Yeah,
okay.
I think like it sounds like, yeah, you just have a better attitude about something, but to become sad, like, it seems harder than just dwelling on a sad thing to really make yourself sad. I don't know.
Yeah, Marianne.
Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a good indicator. I can be easily happy and hard to make sad.
Well, we'll see. When we get to the end of the chapter, maybe I'll ask you again.
Cool.
Yeah, Marianne.
I think our feelings are, they get steered in the direction of where we let our mind dwell,
Okay.
which is different for everybody. I think that plays a lot into whether we're a happy or sad person.
Okay. So what we think about affects our feelings.
And that's where our mind goes and stays.
Sure. Ruth.
It's been my experience that our feelings are in some way responsive to our will. If we make up our mind to be a certain way, and make sure that it's in the will of God.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously not, make up your mind to be wrong, but if you know what is right and you make up your mind that you will do so and so, eventually your emotions will travel along with it. They will follow along simply because your will is continuing to say, this is the right way, I'm going to walk in it whether I'm happy or sad. But eventually you become happy because
Okay.
you know that you're doing the right thing, even if it's not in perhaps a natural thing to be happy about.
So, and I appreciate what you're saying there, because if I get this right, you're saying when you exercise your will and you decide you're going to take some action on something, if it's a virtuous thing to do, that can yield a good feeling of happiness or joy or some other feeling.
It can encourage the growth of
Yeah.
happy feelings.
Right.
Or of some other feeling. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, we've been saying happy and sad like that's the only two feelings you have. What other feelings are there? I don't know.
Hungry.
Hungry? Yes, hunger is a feeling.
frustrating.
Frustrated? Okay. I can make myself frustrated. Yeah, Brian.
You see that in the realm of like athletic competition where a superior team takes the attitude like, we got this, and an inferior team comes in and we have to scratch and claw, and they end up beating the better team because, you know, they didn't get that emotional sort of preset about what they were doing. And if you're going into a circumstance or a situation in your life and you've adopted sort of a doom and gloom perspective about life, you know, this is not going to go well, whether it be a relationship, the work you do, or an athletic event. We're going to lose. Yeah, you're going to lose because
So, one second. I think what you're getting at is sort of the point here is that you can do things to generate the feeling and the feeling that either you want to have or maybe you don't want to have. There's actions you can take to make that the result of it. But you can't jump to the end and say, I'm going to be happy, I'm going to be sad, I'm going to be frustrated. You can't. It's the result of something else. We're going to talk about what those things are. Yeah, Ruth.
I don't want anybody to think that this is a fast process, because sometimes it is very, very slow.
Yep.
As a young woman, I allowed myself to fall in love with a person who did not love me. And he was a very nice guy, and he wanted to remain friends. And you kind of have to figure out what exactly you're going to do. And it was obviously not the Lord's will that I marry that guy. And I had to make up my mind that I was going to fall back out of love with him. But it took months of counseling until I was back on an even keel after allowing myself to be so stupid.
Yeah. So Ruth was saying the time it takes to get from the decision or the will of wanting to get to a feeling to get there, it can be quite a long time to do that. So thanks for sharing that. So I was, being the nerd I am, was thinking about Mr. Spock and Star Trek fans. There's the Amok Time, I think is the episode, but where he's going crazy and he just keeps telling himself, I am in control of my emotions. I am in control of my emotions. And that doesn't really work. It doesn't work for me. If I'm feeling a certain way, I can't just talk myself out of it. I can't just get out of it by saying, stop feeling that way. There's some other things I need to do. And let's talk about those. So the other key thing about feelings is they are variable. Anybody feel the same way all the time? People that kind of have a general feeling to them. They're easygoing or they're not easygoing, and so they may have some more consistency to their feelings, but there's still going to be ups and downs. So reading from the book, we must have been amazed at ourselves many times that on waking up in the morning, we find ourselves in a mood or a condition quite different from the day before. Nothing accounts for it. Yesterday, you may have been perfectly happy and you went to sleep anticipating another great and glorious day, but you find yourself in the morning waking up depressed and in a wrong mood. Suddenly, without any explanation, you just find yourself like that. Is that a common experience? I know it happens to me. I'm in a bad mood. I don't know why. Just you got up on the wrong side of the bed, whatever kind of idioms we have for that sort of thing. But you don't always know. Anybody have anything they want to share that way? That might be digging too deep. Okay. And then we talked previously about temperament or our personality. And there's a similarity in how we're approaching that. And we talked briefly before about our temperament or our personality. We don't want to let that control us. We don't want to be a slave to our personality. I'm an angry person. I'm a fill in the blank person, and that's going to be what I do and how I act, and it's going to affect how I think, and it may come out as a spiritual depression. But in the same way, temperament, we don't want to submit to our feelings. We don't want to be slave to our feelings, and many times we are. How we feel has a big impact on how we see the world, how we act, what the things we do, the things we choose to do. And from the book, he says, our danger is to submit ourselves to our feelings and allow them to dictate to us, to govern and to master us, and to control the whole of our lives. Anybody ever feel that way? That their emotions are driving them? And, I think, hopefully this doesn't step on too many toes, but men and women probably have a little different way of dealing with things. Women tend to be, maybe their emotions are a little more at the surface and ready to, not control, but, yeah, sure, I'll say control, to drive behavior drive interactions, that sort of thing. And, very broad strokes, men are a little more rational and using data and facts, where women would be more relational and emotional and things. Trish didn't hear that though, so I think I'm okay. Any disagreements with that? You can, if you want. In fact, he didn't even mention that in the book. I'm kind of surprised. But he does talk about our nationality and the impact that can have. We'll talk about that in a second. But he does make the point that our feelings, there's not some sort of feeling you've got to have to know that you're a Christian. And some people might think that. They say, I didn't have, talk about it before, if you don't have the big conversion experience to I was a non-believer and then now my life has changed, I'm a believer. If you haven't had that experience, you were raised in a Christian home, for example, or even just how you converted, it wasn't this stark contrast. You may be discouraged by that or think that you're missing out on some aspect of the Christian life. But by the same token, there's not some sort of feeling we're supposed to have, some specific feeling we're supposed to get because we're Christians. So he says, feelings must be engaged in true Christianity, but the mere fact that we have not had certain particular feelings does not of necessity mean that we are not Christian. Feelings are essential, but if we postulate certain particular feelings as being essential, we may very well become victims of the devil and spend the whole of our life in unhappiness and bound in shallows and miseries though the whole time we are truly Christian. Any thoughts on that? That question never gets any answer. I got to ask more specific questions. Okay, and then temperament and nationality. So he goes in a long thing in the book. I didn't quote it. He quotes, those who have read it might have seen he blames the Celtic races, he calls them, for their lack of emotion in general, and you gotta be, if you're too happy, you're doing something wrong, that kind of thing. And there's some national, so we'll call it more cultural than nationality, I think is the key. There's cultural things that affect how we express ourselves and how we emote. I know a lot of Dutch people, and they seem to be a little bit reserved in their emotional response to things. Is that fair? Okay. And then you got the Italians or the Latins that are all, you're talking big and waving your hands and, expressing, more expressive about their emotion. So, again, not to say that anyone's right or wrong, but those things, we can't use them as an excuse if there's anything sinful in those areas. So,
well, I think about the general view of Puritans, that they were stoic, emotionless, very flat, they were not having fun. Yeah, that's sort of the cultural.
yes.
And that's basically because I think a lot of people base their view on, Arthur Miller's The Crucible. He did not have a happy view of the Puritans. So.
Yeah, I mean, the Puritans get that rap, but I think when you actually read them, they're quite deep in their thought about feelings. There's a lot of emotion there. It's wrapped in language that's a little stiff.
Ever read like the Valley of Vision?
Yeah.
Those prayers and things.
For sure.
Pretty strong emotions are expressed in that. And,
So I was trying to find in the book one of the references to that, but I'll spare you. All right, so I think do we all agree that we can't let our feelings control us? That's a bad thing, but we still need to have feelings. Anybody disagree with that? Anybody want to be the type that says feeling bad? Let's not do it.
No feelings.
No feelings. I feel that. No Spocks in here, no Vulcans. Okay. All right, so what do we do with it? Feelings are part of us. We've got to deal with them. So we'll start by examining ourselves, and we talked a lot about this in previous weeks too, about looking, making sure we're seeing ourselves and understanding ourselves. But when you get into the dwelling on yourself too much, that's when you start to become a problem. So I quoted Proverbs 13:15b, and I think I put it in your outline. I used the King James Version because he uses that in his book, but the version there, it says, the way of transgressors is hard. So if you're sinning, you're probably you should have some bad feelings about that. So you should be sad about your sin. Let's read the quote here. If you are at all depressed at this moment, you should make certain that there is no obvious cause for the absence of joyous feelings. For instance, if you're guilty of sin, you're going to be miserable. The way of the transgressor is hard. If you break God's laws and violate his rules, you will not be happy. If you think that you can be a Christian and exert your own will and follow your own likes and dislikes, your Christian life is to be a miserable one. There is no need to argue about it. It follows as the night, the day, that if you are harboring some favorite sin, if you are holding on to something that the Holy Spirit is condemning through your conscience, you will not be happy. There is only one thing to do. Confess it, acknowledge it, repent, go to God at once and confess your sin. Open your heart, bare your soul, tell him all about it, hold nothing back, and then believe that because you have done so, he forgives you. So, pretty clear there, I think. If we're sinning, we're living in some sin, we're even convicted of it, we know it's wrong, but we continue to do it, we're not going to be happy. We're not going to be joyful people going around having a good time all the time. We may think that the sin that we're doing is going to give us that joy, but it's ultimately not going to. So we want to examine ourselves, and then we want to avoid the mistake of concentrating too much on your feelings. So what comes first? How do we not focus on our feelings, and what do we need to focus on first? Sort of hinted at before that we need to do some things rather than just accept our emotional state. Our emotional state is going to be the result of the things that we do.
I think that one quote from the other page, it reminds us how some mornings we wake up and we're irritated with everything, and some mornings we wake up and we're great. It's something we have to keep reminding ourselves. This feeling I have isn't permanent if it's negative, or even if it's positive. But I think we have to do a lot of talking to ourselves through the emotions and remind ourselves of the continuum.
Okay. So talking to yourself, for sure. We talked about that, I think, in the first or second week of this, that when we listen to ourselves is when we're going to get into trouble. It's when we need to talk to ourselves, tell ourselves the truth, the things we know to be true. Because ourselves can fool us, and we can get, we'll tell ourselves the wrong thing. So he quotes Psalm 34:8, which is, again, as he always does. There's a verse that I never would have thought of to apply this way. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. And he's saying it's not just taste and see, they're not two things together, there's a process there. Taste and see. So tasting is, when we think about taste and see that the Lord is good, we're talking about knowing, reading his word, praying, attending to the means of grace, doing all the, letting God speak to you and through his word and trusting him, and then you'll see that the Lord is good. So you need to taste, you need to understand the truth before you can see, and the seeing is the feeling side of things. So that you're going to get that emotional response to what he is, what you have tasted. Taste and see, it follows as the night the day, and seeing before tasting is impossible. That is something constantly emphasized everywhere in the scriptures. So again, from the book, I must never ask myself in the first instance, what do I feel about this? The first question is, do I believe it? Do I accept it? Has it gripped me? Very well, that is what I regard as perhaps the most important rule of all, that we must not concentrate overmuch upon our feelings. Do not spend too much time feeling your own pulse, taking your own spiritual temperature. Do not spend too much time analyzing your feelings. That is the high road to morbidity. Pretty strong language there, that if we focus on our feelings, we're going to end up in a place we don't want to end up. What do you feel about that?
No feeling.
Caleb doesn't feel anything, so I'll stop looking at him. What do you think about that? How about that? Do you want to spend time analyzing your feelings? Do you want to, okay, I feel lousy. You don't want to. I want to. A lot of times I do. I want to wallow in my self-pity, or even wallow in I'm feeling happy and I want to stay there. So that's what I'm shooting for.
And we're made rational yet emotional beings.
Yeah.
And I think the message here is your foundation should be rational. And the rational should come from what God tells us. If we're, particularly as believers, we're seeking to be faithful. Some of us are more stoic than others are. And whether that's a matter of nationality or, sort of genetic predisposition that we inherit from our parents, or whatever the case may be, how much coffee we had back in the day.
Oh yeah, I didn't think about substances
So
and how they're affected.
we've always got that balance, but it's important that we, at the heart of it, remain a rational being. Because a lot of sort of modern response to the world is it's good, your feelings are legitimate, and you can be driven by your feelings, which causes people to do all kinds of crazy stuff and promote all kinds of nonsensical, non-rational causes and actions, and we see that over and over, and that, so that lack of rational foundation, it's probably an attack from Satan on my constant, and that's the thing we have to guard against. But it doesn't mean we should then become emotionless and sort of dour,
Right.
flatline kind of emotional people that are interesting as sawdust or something like that.
Sawdust can be pretty interesting, You make artwork out of it or something. I don't know. So what Ron's saying is we are emotional, but we're also rational, and that the rational should drive the emotional. But as our modern world is today, we start with our feelings a lot. And he didn't mention this because it wasn't an issue in his day. But if you think about the transgender movement and that sort of thing, it's all about, well, I feel like I don't, but I could be saying I feel like a woman, so therefore I'm going to become a woman. I'm going to act like I am a woman.
The fact that gender dysphoria, which is still in the diagnostic manual, an emotional problem,
Disorder, yes.
Disorder,
Yeah.
then becomes.
But we've reversed it, right? Instead of saying I've got XY chromosomes, I'm male. It's I feel like a woman, so therefore I'm going to become a woman. Not I'm a man, and if I'm not feeling like it, then deal with that. Deal with why don't I feel that way? I can't just make myself. We talk about it. We can't. The feelings aren't something you can create or control. So interesting. But he did, like I said, he wasn't dealing with that in his day. But I'm sure there was similar things that would happen in getting.
They didn't have the diagnostic manual back in
He might have been, well, yeah. Martyn Lloyd-Jones probably knew about it, though, because being the doctor that he was. So next we want to talk about the difference between rejoicing and being happy. So there you go, there's a question, a specific question. What's the difference between rejoicing and being happy? Is there a difference?
I feel like just in the terminology, I would think rejoicing is a response to acknowledgement or knowledge of good things, and being happy can just be more of like a state of contentment. That's when I hear those two terms, that's what I think, like rejoicing has like an active component, whereas being happy is more like a passive
Okay.
contentment.
So it's a active component of rejoicing and happiness is a passive thing. Any other thoughts on that? Tracy, I'll spring it on you. What's the difference between rejoicing and being happy? Next time you'll come on time.
It's like volume. Happy is, the dial's at 3, rejoicing is at 7 or 8.
Okay, so you think it's a matter of degree?
That's a pretty simplistic way.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. So I'll
Sorry.
make it simplistic.
Marlon, I think.
I had heard a lot of happiness is more circumstances.
Okay.
Based on what's going on around you, or joy is something that's deeper, that comes from, that's not dependent upon your circumstances. You can have joy, and your circumstances around you are not ideal. So I would say happiness was more about depending on your circumstances.
Okay, so happiness is more dependent on your circumstances. Joy is
Something deeper.
something deeper, which is kind of opposite of what Caleb said. I'm not saying who's right or who's wrong. I will, but yes.
It seems like you rejoice in what's true. You're happy for what happens.
Okay. Rejoice in what's true and happy for what happens. Okay. Any other thoughts? So it's either a matter of degree, joy versus happiness. Which one was, on that spectrum, which was a greater sense? Rejoicing or happiness? Do you go from happiness to rejoicing, or do you go from rejoicing to happiness? In your model.
Happy, rejoicing.
Okay.
So this is another way to look at it. In this life, we should seek to be happy. And there will be times of rejoicing. In heaven, I think it's going to be 100% full-on rejoicing.
Okay.
That's kind of, as I read Scripture, it's why the absence of sin.
All right. That's good. Did you?
That's what I was going to say. I have on my wall that verse, in your presence there is fullness of joy.
Yeah.
Because to me, joy is such a difficult word, especially when we talk about having joy in difficult circumstances.
Mhm.
So to answer your question, I think the joy is first because you're clinging to truth. And then because of that, you may or may not be happy, but that joy hopefully is an immovable thing. And happiness is a little more transient. And that's why once we're in heaven, it's permanent. Because we're at the source of joy.
Right. So in heaven, when we're in glory, we will be with the source of joy, and then we'll also be perfectly happy as well. But so there's a difference. I think we all agree on that. We're sort of not arguing, but discussing what we think about it. So couple verses to think about. Philippians 4:4. Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. So it's kind of a command to do something, right? It doesn't say be happy. It doesn't say feel happy. It says rejoice, which is an active thing I'm going to do. I'm going to, back to Ruth's point earlier, I'm going to decide, my will's going to say, I'm rejoicing. I'm going to try. It's going to be hard sometimes because my circumstances may be horrible, but I'm going to rejoice. And James says, consider it all joy when you face various trials. That's what we're called to do. That's what we need to do. And then 2 Corinthians 4:8-9. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed. So if you think about a contrast there of afflicted, but not crushed. So, afflicted, I'm not happy that I'm afflicted, but I'm not crushed. So I can take joy, I can rejoice that I haven't been crushed. I can be perplexed, but I'm not despairing. And I can rejoice in that. I'm persecuted, but not forsaken. We know we may be feeling persecution, but we know we're not forsaken if we trust God's word. We know he hasn't forsaken us. So we can rejoice in that, even though the circumstances are miserable. We can be joyful. Make sense? All right, good.
You look at the lives of Christians, and maybe even in your experience, you find out one of the tests of your faith is when really bad stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be to you, be to your loved ones, be whatever it is, your ability to respond to those worst events in humanity and life compared to those that have no hope is, if you're doubting your faith, I think that's one of the things, even those bad times are times that go like, you do have hope.
Yeah.
It may seem like a candle flame that's about to blow out, but it's still there. And I think that's where some of the assurance kind of comes, that
A smoking wick he won't extinguish, right?
So it's like,
Yeah.
you could die, and you go, okay.
Yep. Bring it on. I had a response to that, but I don't remember what it was. No, but I appreciate the feedback. So we agree. I think there's a difference between rejoicing and feeling happy. Again, I didn't even put it as it's a feeling versus an action. I rejoice. That's a verb.
Yeah.
Happy. There's no verb form of happy, is there? Happify. Anyway, so back to the book and back to the passage that this sermon was based on is 2 Timothy 1:6, which is, it's on the front. Is it on the front? Did I give it to you? See, I have a different outline than you have because I have a lot more stuff on mine, so I don't just ramble, hopefully. Sorry, I'll get there. 2 Timothy 1:6, I put you in remembrance that you stir up the gift of God which is in you by the putting on of my hands, the laying on of my hands. So stir up the gift. So that's the other thing we can do, stir up the gift. We have a gift from God. So I'll read the quote here. I've reminded you that you must speak to yourself, this horrible self. Speak to it and then stir up the gift. Remind yourself of certain things. Remind yourself of who you are and what you are. You must talk to yourself and say, I am not going to be dominated by you. These moods shall not control me. I am going out. I am breaking through. So get up and walk and do something. Stir up the gift. This is the constant exhortation of the scriptures. If you allow these moods to control you, you will remain miserable. But you must not allow it. Shake them off. Do not recognize them. So I think it's already been talked about. I think a number of people have said similar things like, okay, remind yourself who you are, remind yourself what God's done, take action, do things. That's to prevent the mood from controlling you and taking over you. And you're going to talk to yourself and say, these things are true, and because these things are true, I can rejoice in the truth, and then I may be happy about it, I may not be happy about it, but I can still rejoice and go from there. So we have a long passage, so kind of this is the how you would do that. You all have a handout. You can feel free to read that in your time this afternoon. I won't bore you by reading a whole page worth of stuff, but it gives you some good idea for how you would go about stirring up the gift that of what God's done for you and reminding yourself of who you are and who he is. And then we can be happy. Or maybe not happy, joyful. It's so easy to fall into that. We're not trying, and I think it's kind of a common theme that the getting the order correct. We talk about the ordo salutis. We like things in, we're Presbyterian. We like things decent in decent order, right? So we want to get the order of we don't try to get happy, and then if we try to do that first, we're never going to actually be there. We need to focus on the things that we know are true, rejoice in them, and then happiness comes later. And we trust, as part of our faith is that we trust God that will happen. So, any other thoughts, ideas? I was going to do a little survey because we're about, almost halfway through the book. I do find that I feel like I'm saying the same thing every week. Do you guys feel that? Those that have been here? What?
This is brand new. This is
Because it's interesting. I may end up trying to take a couple of chapters on at a time. We'll see. But there's a formula here for sure, and that's all the reasons that we could be spiritually depressed. The response to them is always the same. It's about your doctrine. Know God, know yourself, know who you are, know why you need a Savior. And when you get that, these things are going to, I want to say take care of themselves, but the more we know and understand, I think the more we're going to be able to get out of those episodes of spiritual depression. But sounds like nobody's complaining that it's been the same every week. So, all right, we'll keep going. All right, why don't we close in prayer? Heavenly Father, we thank you again for bringing us together. Thank you for your word that we heard this morning. Thank you for your promises, the truth that we know through your word. Help us, Lord, to not be controlled by how we feel about it, but may our feelings be the result of what we know. And we praise you that you love us, you sent your Son to die for us and to live a perfect life so that he could be a perfect sacrifice on our behalf. I ask that you would remind us of that all the time, Lord, and may we know who you are and that you love us. Pray all this in your Son's name.